very good. There's no doubt about that. All right. Well, hello, family.
Good morning.
How is everybody? Well, we will indeed be in Ruth again, Ruth chapter 4 to be exact. And I'm going to set my Bible over here if I need it, but I copied all the verses into the notes here, and so that's how I get by with that. But we will be in Ruth chapter 4, and just to remind you, just kind of catch up again, it's really good that we end up with a happy ending, because chapter 1 is a lot of emptiness. And just to catch up with the story again, you remember perhaps that there was a famine that led to the desperation to leave home, to go to an enemy country where they sought refuge. This is Naomi and Elimelech. And while they were there, Mahlon and Chilion, their sons, died, and Elimelech died. And so Ruth and Naomi are completely defenseless. They're alone. But they decide to head back into the unknown of Naomi's hometown. And so they go back there. And that's all in chapter 1. It's very empty. It's very, it just lots of bad things happen all at once. It's kind of like the beginning of Job or something. But then there's this turn toward fullness. And what ends up happening is that Ruth begins to receive this grace, and she knows that she's received this grace from Naomi, and she's got a place to live, and she's got food. And so she says, let me help you. Let me serve. Let me go glean. And that's what she ends up doing. And Boaz, whose field she happens to glean in, and I say happens to glean in because it was God at work behind the whole thing, as we know. But Boaz offers her favor. Boaz feeds her. Boaz gives her water whenever she needs it when she's working. Boaz makes her one of his own. He brings her into his community of workers and almost his family. And then there's this rather unorthodox marriage proposal that we looked at last week, where apparently Ruth is spying on Boaz from the shadows, stalking him or something. I don't understand this. But because she had to know when he went and laid down, and when he went and laid down, she went, uncovered his feet, which I believe is literal. I think she curled up at his feet. And then when he woke up and realized there was someone else there, wouldn't that be weird? She says, spread the corner of your garment over me, which is take me in. It's a rather unorthodox marriage proposal. And then, in chapter 4, we get our happy ending. And we're going to jump in at verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. And then the women, all the people gathered around, said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer. And may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. See, at first you think that's talking about Boaz, but you realize fairly quickly, especially by the end, she's talking about the son. The son is the one who will be a restorer of life and a nourisher of Naomi's old age. Verse 16, then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Fade to black, cue the theme song, until the mid-credits scene, because there's always a mid-credits scene. But this is, if we were writing this just to entertain ourselves, this is where we would end it. It's a happy ending. There is more. I'll just tell you right now, there is more, and that's where the real beauty is. But if we were writing it just for ourselves, we would end it here because it's just so perfect. It's so tight. It's all wrapped up with a bow. Very neat. It's the happily ever after ending. But you and I know happily ever after isn't realistic. It's why we tend to write stories this way. Happily ever after distracts us from reality. As I said, there is an after credit scene. And that after credit scene, as you're going to see, it jars us into reality. And it also gives us a far greater hope than happily ever after ever was. You might remember that when Boaz tells Ruth to stay here, part of what he meant by that, or part of what we talked about, was stay here meant stay here, yes, in my place of safety and grace and protection. But here also meant hard work. It meant uncertainty. It meant risk. It meant a lot of things for Ruth that she just didn't know. Happily ever after for Boaz and Ruth means the same things. It's still real, okay? So happily ever after for Boaz, and we kind of have to set the word, and just kind of guess, just kind of think about human nature and make some guesses here. But happily ever after means that Ruth and Boaz argued about how to raise Obed. Because parents always argue about how to raise their kids. Not heated arguments necessarily, but there's disagreements, right? We all know that. Happily ever after meant unexpected expenses and unexpected repairs to things around the home. It would have been different for them than us, but it's the same thing. It meant the child got sick and the parents worried. It meant poop explosions at just the wrong time. Right? It meant that two people needed the same donkey at the same time. It meant Obed said no sometimes. It meant Boaz got sick and Ruth got worried. It meant navigating adolescence with their kid. It meant bad years for Boaz's farm, because every farmer has bad years. It meant that Ruth watched her beloved mother-in-law get older and die. And it meant that either Ruth or Boaz faced the grief of putting the other in the ground. The happily ever after always includes real life. So even when one of your stories gets a happy ending, when you get the job, when you get pregnant, when you get married, when you get the house, when something comes together and you get your little happy ending, in that part, there's another part of your life where there's still questions. There's another part of your life where you're still uncertain of some things. And even in the happy ending, there's going to be challenges. We moved about 8 years ago. It was March 14th when we moved into our house. Never owned a home before. I was so excited. I really wished my parents could come over and see it, but they can't travel. But I wanted to show my dad, my first home. Because he built their first home from sticks. Like, he grabbed lumber and built their first home. The only thing he contracted out was plumbing, because to this day he does not touch plumbing. And he contracted out electrical. That was it. He did the concrete work himself. He did every stick in that house he built himself. So I wanted to show him somebody else's house, but somebody else built it, but I owned it. Sort of. Bank owns it. I wanted that moment, And so that was a really, really happy day when we owned this house. But stuff goes wrong. Stuff breaks down. Stuff has to be repaired. There's always reality in happily ever after. So the beauty of this story, and the beauty of the story that God writes right alongside Ruth's story, is that it gives hope even when our happily ever after is invaded by real life. So go back up to verse 11, and then we'll get to the after credit scene. This takes place right after the announcement of Ruth and Boaz's marriage takes place. Verse 11. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in, I think it's Ephrath, and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman." See, those are beautiful blessings. Leah and Rachel were the matriarchs of Israel. They were the mothers of many of the children that became the 12 tribes of Israel. If you didn't already know it, they truly did build up the house of Israel, just like the blessing says. If you didn't already know it because the story is new to you, which, in a group like this, I don't know who was in Sunday school and who wasn't. I don't know whether they covered Ruth in Sunday school or not. But if you didn't know it until now you know. Ruth and Boaz are the father of Obed. Obed is the father of David. That David. Jesse. Jesse is the father of David. David. King David. David and Goliath David. So this is pretty amazing. This isn't just a story about Ruth and Boaz, it's a story about David. But then you look at verse 12, and it says, "May your house be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring the Lord will give you by this young woman." Who's Perez? Who's Tamar and Judah? Does anybody remember studying Tamar, Judah, and Perez in Sunday school, if you grew up in Sunday school? Probably minor characters, so we can probably just move on. But here's the after credits. Look at verse 18. "Now these are the generations of Perez." He must be important after all. Perez fathered Hezron, Hezron fathered Ram, Ram fathered Amminadab, Amminadab fathered Nahshon, Nahshon fathered Salmon, Salmon fathered Boaz, Boaz fathered Obed, Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered David. So obviously David is critical here, but there's Perez again. King David, David and Goliath David. Unite the kingdoms, David. Great kingdom of Israel, David. Traces his family line back to the house of Perez. The blessing of Ruth and Boaz's house is that theirs be like the house of Perez. So who is Perez? Let me just tell you that Perez is going to make Ruth look normal. Okay? Naming your children sickly and dying, which seems to be what everybody remembers about Ruth, that's going to be normal. Ruth stalking Boaz from the shadows and laying down at his feet, that's about to sound really, really normal. The story where we skipped, where Boaz negotiates for the hand of Ruth in marriage, and the other guy takes off his sandal and gives it to Boaz, that's going to seem normal. We skipped that because that's just, I didn't even know what to do with that. And it's just part of the negotiation of the marriage. But Perez's story is one of the reasons why I believe logically, not just because I grew up as a person of faith, not because I just have this understanding of God or whatever, I believe logically that everything in our Bibles is true. Because if you were writing a book about a religion, about a God, about something that you were trying to impress people with, you would hide stories like Perez. Okay? So, who is Perez? Track with me on some history, because Perez's story is important to Ruth. So just stick with me, okay? Judah was one of the original 12 sons of Jacob who formed the 12 tribes of Israel. That part, remember? There's 12 tribes in Israel that came from 12 sons. Judah was one of those sons. Judah sought out a wife from among foreigners. So instead of marrying within his tribe, within his people, he went outside and got a wife from an enemy country. They had 2 sons. Judah went out and got a wife for his son. His son's name was and his wife's name was Tamar. So Judah got Tamar for Then died. And so Judah gave his second son, Onan, to his daughter-in-law. So now, Tamar, instead of being married to Tamar is married to Onan. Except then, Onan died. And so Judah then instructed Tamar to live in his house as a widow. He graciously took her in and provided for her because he didn't have any sons at that time. Now the details are different, but that all should sound a little familiar. There's 2 sons. They both died. There's wives from enemy lands. There's a widow that's taken in. But here's where Ruth looks normal. And I'm just telling you exactly what the Bible says. After Judah's wife died, he grieved her loss for quite a while. And then it came time to get his sheep shorn. He was a shepherd, and so he's taking his sheep to the shearer in order to get it shorn. That's like a tongue twister. So Tamar, who is Judah's daughter-in-law, took matters into her own hands. And she disguised herself, and she sat down at the entrance to one of the towns that she knew Judah was going through. When Judah went to that town and saw her, he thought she was a prostitute. And he treated her as a prostitute. He gave her his seal, his signet ring, and some other very personal belongings as a pledge to pay her later. So about 3 months later, Tamar was pregnant. It's a very bad thing in that time period. What you would do is you would kill someone that was in that position at that time. And so Judah is just absolutely outraged. Judah demands that Tamar be burned alive for her despicable sin. Until Tamar says, "Oh wait, I'm pregnant by the man who owns these." And then she gives him back his signet ring and his staff and his cloak. So suddenly Judah has a change of heart about the whole burning alive thing. That's probably not the best idea because, well, it's his kid. Tamar gave birth to what turned out to be twins, and one of those twins was Perez. So to track all that, when the people of Bethlehem were blessing Boaz with the words, "May your family be like that of Perez," as odd as this sounds for the moment, here's what they were really saying. May your family be like the son of a semi-incestuous relationship in which the mother pretended to be a prostitute and the father was actually her father-in-law. These people belong on mooring. No DNA testing back in that day. Judah just knew. Verse 18, chapter 4, Ruth. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered this man fathered Ram, this man fathered Benadab, and go all the way down to Boaz fathered Obed, Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered David. See, this story, it certainly is about Ruth, it's about Perez, it's about Naomi, it's about Boaz, it's about David, but this story is about God's power to redeem anyone at any time and anything. He can redeem anything and anyone at any time. That is what this story, I believe, is about. Because of God's work, Obed redeems this entire family line. Boaz rips the family line from death and sin and futility and self, and God, through Boaz, sets the family line on a new path. See, when you look at the story as a whole, when you look at the story as not just Ruth's story or whatever, if you look at it as a whole, each one of the people is redeemed. Boaz is redeemed from not being fully qualified as Ruth's redeemer. Naomi is redeemed from bitterness. Naomi is redeemed from false notions, lies about God. Ruth is redeemed from shame and from idolatry. Perez is redeemed from being the son of a despicable sin. And it is this second story that is so often unseen. that God is writing next to all of our stories. See, all our stories, all our failures and falls, our joys, our celebrations, our griefs, our happy endings, and our wish it had turned out different endings, all are graciously a part of what God is doing in His world. Because just as God, through Ruth, pulled this family line out of the mess, Jesus pulls your family line into His. That is the good news. Yes, Jesus died for our sins and to give us forgiveness, but so much more happened. By faith, you were pulled into the family line of Jesus, which means that you were grafted into the vine. You were adopted. You received full rights as children of His. He became your Father, not in some symbolic way, but in reality. He really is your Father. He seated you in the heavens. Every sin you have, will, are committing has been wiped out. It's been forgiven. It was placed on Jesus on the cross, and every sin was killed. You are fully forgiven in the Beloved. This second story is being written alongside our stories. His story wraps our stories in Him, which means that your stories are forever wrapped up in His story. It's mind-boggling to me. It's beautiful to me. It's lovely to me. It's attractive to me. When you fail, it's His grace that covers you. When you figure it out and follow, it's His strength that empowers you. When you grieve, you don't do it like other people do. You grieve in hope because of the comfort that God gives. When you have joys, you celebrate His work because He's the author of good things. When you're hurting or afraid or hopeless, or you're forced to do things to survive, or your child dies, or your husband dies, if it's a good year, if it's a bad year, if this story is turning out happily and this story has still got questions, you never do those things and feel those things alone. You are in His family. Ruth went from outside the family to inside the family, pulled the entire family tree that was marked by Perez and by a despicable sin, moved it. You are in His family. And at the end of all things, you stand with Him. When all the sad things become untrue, to quote C.S. Lewis. When all the wrongs are made right. When we enter a kingdom that is beyond description, we stand with Him. When we are finally, fully know Him as He already knows us, it's because we're in our family. The Ruth 1, the beginning of Ruth, it's just empty. Empty is almost never a good thing. Back when we used to eat ice cream, we don't do so very much anymore. But I used to joke that one of the saddest sounds in the world is the empty chocolate syrup container. You know what I mean? A little sound. It's just sad. There's no more chocolate syrup. Or the Jeep that the company graciously allows me to drive has a 12.5-gallon tank, supposedly. And it came on, the light came on, just past the Kickapoo exit. So, I just kind of risked it. Just kind of rolled with it. And I thought about stopping in Knoxville. No biggie. And I just kept going, and there's that brand new Casey's right there in the corner of the highway. I pulled in there, and I put in 12.3 gallons of gas. Empty is almost never a good thing. But here's the thing. Here's the thing to remember. Empty is an invitation. If you ever go to a restaurant with me, Deanna can attest to this. I hate it. I hate it when my glass of water is empty. Just dry. I put it on the edge of the table. Just to, like, some random person coming by could fill it, you know? Just any of the waiters, any of the, just fill it, please. Empty is an invitation. So, Ruth chapter 1, as dark and as empty and as hopeless and as bad as it looks, it's an invitation. Every story in our lives that you and I are kind of like, oh, golly, I don't know how this is going to turn out. I don't know what to do. Every question you have, it's an invitation. Let me ask you, if you had the ability to fill up something, you know, if you could do it, would you leave it empty? If you had the resources to fill it, would you leave it empty? So why do we so quickly assume and come to the conclusion that God, who certainly has the resources, would leave any situation or any person empty? Empty is an invitation. Chapter 1, Naomi's husband and sons both die. She's stuck in a foreign land. The famine ends. She travels with Naomi back to Bethlehem. Ruth's husband has died, and her sister, along with the rest of her family, have been cut off. When the two women return to Bethlehem, Naomi is bitter. Even the final phrase of chapter 1 reads, "The barley harvest was beginning." So they can't plant, even if they had the ability to do so. The only option is what happens. She goes gleaning. Empty is an invitation. So if you feel empty, or feel like a situation has been drained of all hope, or if you fear your future is empty, Ruth 4, after the credits, has this surprising fullness. Because from chapter 2 forward, the emptiness of chapter 1 just keeps getting filled up and filled up and filled up. Ruth is treated with grace and given the abundance of Boaz's favor. Boaz, it turns out, is a kinsman redeemer, a man capable of helping them. Boaz accepts Ruth's marriage proposal. The two are wed, blessed by the community. And in all of those ways, God just keeps pulling back emptiness into, here, let me fill that up. He keeps pulling despicable sin over into his family line. He keeps changing things. He keeps pulling them from a family line of destruction into his own family line. There is always a second story being written alongside everything that you're reading. That is faith. Evidence of things hoped for. Conviction of things not yet seen. You know the stories in your life right now. You know what's scaring you right now. You know what's absolutely uncertain to you right now. You know what weaknesses you have right now. You know where you feel alone right now. You know those stories. This after credits, as I keep calling it, is our hope. It's just one example of 1,000 in Scripture and millions in people's lives all around the world. It's just one example. Right alongside all those stories that you know so well, God is writing something different. He is writing a story that redeems you now, redeems people around you. He is using you in ways that you can't fathom. It's that feeding the 5,000 thing all over again. It's that act of love shown into his kingdom that he uses in eternal ways. He is pulling you back into his family tree. And I pray that we have eyes to be able to see that. Because that is what gives us hope. When happily ever after either gets derailed or when you're just still stuck in the messy middle, there is a different story being written. So Father God, give us eyes to see you. And God, give us eyes to see that even our the mistakes that we regret the most, even though Perez ends up in the family line of David, David ends up in the family line of Jesus. You can't tell me that Judah and Tamar didn't regret. You can't tell me they didn't have guilt. So even the worst thing that we've ever done, the thing that we regret the most, God, because we are yours, somehow, in your wisdom, in your mercy, in your graciousness, even in your justice, somehow, that is being used. Because when you pull us into your family tree, it's not like just the good parts come. You didn't look at me and decide you wanted to save me, you wanted to rescue me from every wrong thing I'd ever done because, oh, he's such a good guy. He did this, this, and this right, and we'll pull that in and make the best of it. That's not how this works. The good news is that when you pull us into your family line, when you make us your children, everything comes from us. Every weakness, every uncertainty, every heartache, every pain, every trouble, every sin. And somehow, you use our brokenness, redeem us, you redeem people around us. Your light shines through every crack. Just like Naomi. I can't begin to understand how these things work. But I pray for me and for those that are listening to me for the faith to believe it's true. And to know that there is something else going on far, far bigger than whatever it is that has my attention. Give us eyes to trust that. I ask that in Jesus' name.